Good afternoon, everyone. So, Ambassador Mahbubani, my first question for you is about leaders. In your book, you highlight how leaders, whether good or flawed, can leave a profound impact not just on the trajectories of their own countries, but on the international system as a whole. And you have also argued several times that the West's ongoing decline is also reflected in its growing inability to produce great leaders. And this leads to a leadership vacuum worldwide. So, my question for you is, do you think that Southeast Asian leaders, with their distinct perspectives, can have the potential to fill this gap and connect with a truly global audience?
First of all, thank you very much for the very generous words, Andrea. I deeply appreciate them. And you're right, in my memoirs, I highlight the importance of leaders, and certainly I do say that I personally have benefited a lot from the fact that the founding generation of Singapore's leaders, by the way, especially Lee Kuan Yew, Goh Keng Swee, and Rajaratnam were exceptional leaders. They were geopolitical geniuses, looking back now. And you never actually ever succeed in life if you don't have great teachers. And these three leaders were great teachers. And in the course of my life, I actually had a chance to meet world leaders. And in a sense, I had a chance to compare Singapore's leaders with many of the world leaders I met, and clearly Singapore's leaders of the founding generation were exceptional. But what's sadly happening is that in many parts of the world, the quality of mind of leaders has gone down. It's a very sad reality. And to me, especially in terms of, again, I apologize, Andrea, for looking at your region, Europe, because, Europe, really, as I mentioned earlier, had the ability to run the world, has produced great leaders, Churchill, Charles de Gaulle, and others. And even as recently as 1990, when I accompanied the then Prime Minister of Singapore, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, before he sat down as Prime Minister, he did a farewell tour of Europe. And we went to UK, we met Margaret Thatcher. She's a remarkable woman, I must say. We had dinner in number 10 Downing Street. And she stood up extemporaneously and gave a brilliant tribute to Lee Kuan Yew, and Lee Kuan Yew responded, with amazing, elegance and precision. So, and then we went to France and we met François Mitterrand, again a very thoughtful leader, with a very long horizon of history. And we went to Germany and we met Helmut Kohl, who, as you know, played a critical role in the ending of the Berlin Wall and so on and so forth. When you look at Europe today, I won't name names. The quality of mind of leaders is not the same. Maybe I make one exception. It's a fair exception. I mean, Boris Johnson, right, was a joker, right? How you go from Margaret Thatcher to Boris Johnson is quite an amazing trajectory. He went from one of the best to one of the worst. And then if he was a joker, he was succeeded by a joke. His plus, who stayed in office, they say, shorter than a lettuce. I mean, that's a perfect example of how quality of mind of leaders has deteriorated. And I can tell you also that in my last one-on-one conversation with Henry Kissinger, another person from whom I must confess I learned a lot, in October 2022, about a year before he died, we were discussing the quality of mind of European leaders. And he was genuinely worried about how the leaders in Europe didn't seem to understand the issues. And I think Henry Kissinger, as you know, also believed that the war in Ukraine could have been prevented if there had been better wiser, more able leaders in Europe, but they were not able to do so. So this is a real problem. I don't know whether the Southeast Asian countries are still not that big enough to make a difference. But it does help that both China and India today have very strong leaders. And you can see, for example, if I ask you to name how many leaders in the world can today visit Moscow and be received warmly, and visit Ukraine and be received warmly. There are very few leaders who can achieve that. One of them is Modi. And it shows you, therefore, how India now is in a different league. So I would say countries like China and India can play a bigger role. And China, as you know, played a role in brokering the Iran-Saudi Arabia deal. China played a role in getting the Palestinian factions to come together. And so I think these two countries potentially have the capability of playing a bigger role. But you can speak more eloquently about Europe. But the sad part is how Europe's capabilities and capacity as a geopolitical actor have diminished significantly in the last 2 decades.
Thank you so much for such an insightful answer.